Welcome back to the deep dive. And hey, if you're following along with the social psychology curriculum at Los Angeles City College, you've made it. Module 7.
Module 7, yeah. Big congrats, especially to everyone in Professor Segi's class. You've put in some serious work on the foundations.
You really have. And now we're driving straight into, well, the heart of it all. Persuasion.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. We're talking about how messages, really, any message can actually change what you believe, how you feel, your attitudes, or even just what you do.
And honestly, for young people trying to figure things out in a city like Los Angeles, understanding influence, it's not just academic, is it? It feels more like essential survival skill.
Oh, completely. Think about the high-stakes decisions you're making constantly. What career path to even chase in this, super competitive market?
Right, or just managing family stuff, the stress, trying to carve out your own identity when, LA culture is throwing a million different messages your way.
Exactly. So this module, think of it as a map. It helps you see how you're being influenced, and maybe just as importantly, how you influence others around you.
Okay, so let's ground this a bit. The module talks about real-world examples, right? Like how false beliefs can spread like wildfire sometimes.
Yeah, or how attitudes about really big things like equality evolve over time, or even tackling stuff like climate change skepticism. The module even has that figure showing how American adults' worry about global warming has fluctuated quite a bit from '97 to 2023.
It shows influence is always happening. It's messy, it's complex, but we can actually track it.
But crucially, influence isn't automatic. Getting someone from just hearing a message to actually doing something, well, that message has to clear some hurdles.
There are hurdles.
Yeah.
Okay. And that takes us right into the two main ways our brains process this stuff, the two routes.
The central and peripheral routes to persuasion.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is that the route you take actually determines how long that persuasion sticks around.
Okay, let's unpack the central route first. So this happens when you're genuinely interested, motivated.
Engaged, yeah. You focus on the arguments, the facts, the evidence. You respond with, deliberate analytical thinking.
That sounds effortful.
It is effortful. It's serious cognitive work.
Yeah.
If you're really weighing the pros and cons of two different grad schools or analyzing some complex policy proposal.
You're using the central route. You're being the careful scientist.
Exactly.
But hang on. How often are we really doing that? I feel like most of my day is spent kind of cruising on the other one.
The peripheral route. You're probably right, actually. That's often the default setting.
So what's that one about?
That's when you're influenced by more incidental cues, things that trigger automatic acceptance without a lot of deep thought.
Like what sort of cues?
Oh, how confident the speaker seems, maybe how attractive they are, or just the sheer number of points they make, even if the points themselves are kind of weak.
Or the catchy music in the background of an ad.
Totally. Or maybe it's just a simple heuristic, a mental shortcut like, oh, trust the experts, or long messages seem more credible.
Okay, I definitely use that route. Like buying a generic brand because the package looks cooler, or trusting an opinion just because the person saying it is famous. That's peripheral.
And that brings us to the really crucial takeaway for this module, central route processing. It's harder, yes, but it leads to change that lasts. It's more enduring.
Why? Because you've done the work yourself.
Pretty much. You haven't just relied on the surface appeal. You've relied on your own thoughts that you generated while thinking about it. That makes the attitude stick. Peripheral change. It can be quick, powerful in the moment, but often it fades.
Gotcha. So if I really want to make a lasting change, like convincing myself to stick to a new gym routine,
Yeah.
I need to engage with the reasons, the benefits, the why. That's central route.
Exactly. Not just focus on the cool new running shoes, which is more peripheral.
Makes sense. And this leads nicely into that classic framework social psychology uses for persuasion, right?
Yeah.
Who says what?
Who says what by what method to whom?
Yeah.
The communicator, the message, the channel, and the audience. The 4 key elements.
Okay, element 1,
Yeah.
the communicator.
Yeah.
Who's actually delivering the message? You mentioned credibility earlier.
Absolutely central. The communicator needs to be seen as both an expert on the topic and trustworthy. If you're missing one of those,
You're kind of sunk from the start.
pretty much, yeah, it's hard to recover.
But then there's, right, like physical appeal or just feeling similar to the person.
Both work. Appeal is super persuasive, especially when the decision is more subjective, like what music to listen to or which social group to join. Subjective preferences are very susceptible to liking.
Okay, that tracks. Let's move to element 2, the message itself. What is actually being said? Reason versus emotion.
And the research basically says it depends entirely on your audience.
How so?
If your audience is, say, well-educated, analytical, really motivated to think, they tend to prefer reasoned arguments, data, logic.
Central root folks.
Right. But if the audience is maybe less interested or less motivated to think deeply, then you often need to go for emotion. Tug at the heartstrings, maybe evoke a strong feeling.
And fear can be one of those feelings, right?
Fair.
But it's tricky.
Very tricky. Fear can enhance persuasion, especially fear of loss or danger. But, and this is a big but, only if the message also provides a clear, feasible, effective way to avoid that danger.
So you can't just scare people. You have to scare them and give them an actionable solution.
Yeah.
Empower them.
Precisely. Otherwise, people just shut down or deny the threat.
Okay, now shifting gears within the message.
Yeah.
What about those techniques, the ones that rely on how you sequence requests? Those seem super relevant for everyday LA life, like negotiating or even just in relationships.
Oh, absolutely. The compliance techniques. First up, probably the most common, the foot in the door phenomenon.
Get a yes to something small first.
And they're much more likely to say yes to a bigger related request later.
Why does that work so well? It feels almost too simple.
Well, one theory is self-perception. When you agree to that small request, you subtly shift how you see yourself. You think, I guess I'm the kind of person who supports this cause, or I'm a helpful person.
Ah, so that small yes changes your self-image slightly.
Exactly. And then to be consistent with that new self-image, you feel more compelled to agree to the larger request.
That's really powerful. Okay, what's next?
The low ball.
The low ball technique. Yeah, this one feels a bit sneaky. Someone gets you to agree to an initial request, maybe an attractive price on something. Seems like a great deal. Okay, I'm hooked.
And then after you've already agreed, the cost gets raised or the terms change, become less favorable. But often, people still stick with the agreement.
Even though the original reason is gone. Why?
It leverages that psychological commitment you made. You already said yes, you started down that path. Maybe you even pictured yourself with the item or service. It's harder to back out even when the deal gets worse. It's like they up the ante after you're already in.
Oof. Okay. And the opposite of starting small is?
The door-in-the-face technique. Here, you start with the opposite. A huge, outrageous request, something you know they'll probably reject.
Like asking your parents for $1,000.
Something like that, yeah. They say no, obviously. But then you immediately follow up with a much smaller, more reasonable request, maybe asking for $50 instead.
Ah, that seems tiny by comparison.
Exactly. It feels like a concession on your part, so they feel more obligated to meet you halfway and agree to the smaller request. The contrast makes the second request seem much more acceptable.
Clever. Okay, still on the message, but moving from what is said to when. Primacy versus recency, first versus last.
Right, the timing puzzle. Does the information you hear first have the most impact, or the information you hear last?
And the answer is, it depends.
It depends entirely on the timing, specifically the time gaps.
Okay, explain.
So if you hear message A, then immediately message B back to back, and then there's a significant delay before you have to make a decision or state your opinion. Message A usually wins. That's the primacy effect. First impressions stick when there's time for forgetting.
Got it. First message, second message, long pause, decision, primacy.
But if there's a time gap between message A and message B, and then you have to respond immediately after hearing message B, then message B often has the edge. That's the recency effect. The last message is freshest in your mind.
Message A, pause. Message B, immediate decision. Recency. Wow, okay. Memory decay and processing time really matter.
You really do. And thinking about how messages reach us, that leads straight into the third element, the channel. How is it actually said? The medium.
And does the medium matter much?
Hugely. There's a pretty clear hierarchy of persuasiveness, generally speaking. Yeah. The more lifelike, the better.
So, like, face-to-face is best.
Live, face-to-face interaction tends to be the most persuasive. Then videotaped, then audio taped, and finally written tends to be the least persuasive just in terms of immediate impact. That live human connection carries a lot of weight.
But isn't there a big exception?
Yes. The crucial exception. If the message itself is really complex, difficult, dense with information.
Like maybe some of the readings in this module?
Could be. In that case, written communication is actually best for comprehension and recall.
Why is that?
Because you can control the pace. You can stop, reread, think about it, digest it properly. With a live or videotaped message, complex info can just fly by too quickly. Figure 5 in the module actually discusses this interaction between message difficulty and the medium.
Okay, that makes sense. And we also can't forget about how media influence often isn't direct, right? The two-step thing.
The two-step flow of communication. Yeah, that's important. Media messages often hit opinion leaders first.
Who are opinion leaders?
People in your social network, maybe friends, family, colleagues, who you see as knowledgeable or trustworthy on certain topics. They absorb the media message, process it, and then pass it along to their own circles, often with their personal spin.
So the influence flows through them.
Often, yes. That word of mouth, that personal recommendation or interpretation from someone you trust, that can be incredibly influential, sometimes more than the original media message itself.
Which brings us neatly to the final element, the audience. To whom is the message being directed? What audience factors matter?
Two big ones highlighted in the module are age and thoughtfulness.
Let's start with age.
Hmm.
Do people's attitudes just change as they get older?
Well, there are two main ideas here. The life cycle explanation suggests, yes, attitudes might naturally mellow or shift over the course of a lifespan.
But that's not the main theory.
No, the evidence tends to more strongly support the generational explanation,
Which says
that people tend to hold on to the core attitudes and values they form during their formative years, late adolescence, and early adulthood.
so the big differences we see between age groups on certain issues aren't necessarily individuals changing their minds as they age.
But rather that different generations formed different baseline attitudes when they were young, and they largely carry those attitudes through life. The module uses attitudes towards same-sex marriage in the U.S. as a great example of this generation gap.
Right, so the cultural context when you were, say, 1825
Right.
really shapes your lifelong views on many things.
It seems to have a very powerful, lasting effect.
Okay, and the other audience factor, thoughtfulness.
Yes, basically how much people enjoy thinking. Social psychologists call this the need for cognition. Are you someone who likes to analyze things, mull over arguments, solve problems?
So high need for cognition means you're naturally leaning towards.
The central route. You're motivated to think deeply, you'll be persuaded by strong arguments, and you'll actively pick apart weak ones. You generate counter-arguments.
That analytical tendency is like a built-in defense mechanism.
It really is. And related to thoughtfulness, things like being forewarned that someone is about to try and persuade you can trigger defenses, or conversely, being distracted makes you more susceptible to peripheral cues because you can't focus on the arguments.
Okay, and we have to weave in Cialdini's principles here too, right? Those underlying drivers.
Definitely. Robert Cialdini identified these, 7 key principles that seem to underlie a vast amount of influence. Authority, liking, social proof, reciprocity, consistency, scarcity, and a newer one, unity.
Let's maybe zoom in on consistency and unity because they seem super relevant for navigating commitments and social groups, especially here in LA. Consistency first.
Consistency taps into our deep-seated desire to be and to appear, consistent with our past actions, statements, and beliefs. We don't like feeling like hypocrites.
And the module had that great restaurant example.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
They slashed their no-show rates dramatically just by changing the script. Instead of passively saying, please call us if you change your plans.
They asked the question.
They asked, will you please call us if you change your plans? Getting that person to say yes, even just verbally, creates a small public commitment. And people strive to honor their commitments to remain consistent.
Wow. Such a tiny change. Such a big impact. Okay, what about unity?
Unity is about shared identity, the feeling of we-ness. People are far more likely to be influenced by someone they perceive as being one of them.
Sharing a background, culture, values.
Exactly. Common roots, shared experiences, belonging to the same group, whether it's your college, your neighborhood, your cultural background. That sense of shared identity, of unity, makes the communicator much more persuasive because they're part of your tribe. For students navigating all the different groups and identities in LA, understanding unity is key.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about how persuasion works, how we're influenced. Let's flip it. How do we push back? How do we resist persuasion when it's unwanted or misleading?
That's crucial. And the first step is acknowledging that actually being persuaded is often easier. It's the path of least resistance sometimes.
Why is that?
Well, some research suggests that just to understand an assertion, you first have to mentally represent it as true, at least for a fleeting moment. Doubt requires a second, more effortful step. So acceptance can feel more automatic.
So resistance takes conscious effort. What strategies work?
Basic critical thinking, really. Questioning assumptions. Rethinking knee-jerk reactions to authority figures, actively seeking out more information, especially from diverse sources, and importantly, questioning things you don't fully understand instead of just nodding along.
But the module highlights one strategy specifically: inoculation, like a vaccine.
Attitude inoculation. Exactly like a vaccine for the mind. The idea is you expose people to weak attacks on their existing attitudes or beliefs.
Why weak attacks?
Because a weak attack isn't strong enough to overwhelm them, but it is strong enough to stimulate their defenses. It motivates them to think about why the attack is wrong, to come up with counter-arguments.
So they practice defending their position.
Precisely. They develop the mental antibodies, the counter-arguments, in response to the weak threat. Then, when a stronger, more potent, persuasive attack comes along later...
They're ready for it. They already have their defenses prepared.
Exactly. The module uses examples like inoculating kids against peer pressure for smoking or vaping, or against the lure of advertising. And the data mention showing lower smoking rates in the inoculated school versus the control school, that demonstrates it really works.
So the lesson isn't to shield people from opposing views.
No, quite the opposite. The best way to build resilience isn't to create some kind of germ-free ideological environment. It's to actively teach people, especially kids, how to analyze and counter persuasive appeals. Exposure and practice builds strength, not avoidance.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the big picture for, the students listening, trying to navigate life in LA?
I think understanding these pathways, these elements, these defenses, it really is like getting a map to your own mind and the social world around you. It's kind of a thrilling adventure, really, into understanding yourself and others.
Yeah, and we really hope you take this and reflect on how persuasion is playing out in your own life. Think about those family debates, or the choices you're making about your career path, the things you buy, even how you handle academic stress.
How consciously are you trying to influence others? And maybe more importantly, how critically are you evaluating the messages coming at you?
And remember, being open to influence, especially informational influence based on good arguments, that's not a weakness. That's how we learn and grow. Critical thinking lets us do that without just being, gullible.
We're actually really excited for you to tackle the assignments and discussions Professor Seggi has lined up for this module. They sound like they'll really challenge you to apply these concepts.
Definitely. So we'll leave you with one final thought to chew on as you finish up this deep dive.
If critical thinking, that central route processing, is the key to resisting manipulation but also to growth, when was the last time you intentionally changed your mind about something important, not because of a flashy appeal or who said it, but because you encountered a really strong, compelling argument?
Something to think about. Keep questioning, keep engaging, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.